shouldn't be thinking about the space between words. Not the pause before a name. Not the way a room changes when someone walks in. And yet my body always knows before I do. Zoe Lancaster sat at the head of the dining table like she had been trained for it, shoulders relaxed, spine straight, expression soft enough to be approachable and guarded enough to be unchallenged. The house around her was quiet in the expensive way. Thick walls, muted light furniture that absorbed sound instead of echoing it back. Outside, Manhattan rain made the windows shine like polished stone. Her mother had insisted on candles, as if a warm glow could turn a divorce into something tasteful. Zoe watched a flame bend when the air conditioning clicked on. She watched her own hands too, fingers folded, then unfolding, then folding again. A small habit she'd never been able to kill. At her ring finger, she paused, rubbing the skin as if a band had once lived there and left an imprint. The door to the study was open. The divorce binder sat on the sideboard in a leather sleeve, its edges clean and sharp, like a blade that hadn't been used yet. Across from Zoe, her boyfriend angled his chair toward her mother with practiced ease. He had the kind of calm that came from never worrying about consequences. "So," he said, lifting his glass. "Is it official then? We finally have counsel?" Zoe forced a smile to the corner of her mouth. It was the smile she used for photographers, for charity galas, for men who assumed her silence was agreement. Her mother, Zoe's entire inheritance of grace and steel, tilted her head slightly. At 52, she still looked like a woman people made room for. There was a sharpness under the softness now, though, as if something inside her had stopped tolerating what it used to swallow. "Yes," she said, voice even. "She'll be here tonight." Zoe blinked. "Tonight?" Her mother's gaze flicked to her, quick and measured. "It's time, darling. Time." The word landed like a verdict. Zoe leaned back in her chair and let her hair fall over one shoulder. The movement was automatic, part defense, part performance. She could feel the silk of her blouse against her skin, cool at the collarbone, a reminder that she was dressed not for comfort but for control. Her boyfriend's knee bumped hers under the table, a quiet claim, a suggestion of solidarity. Or ownership. Zoe couldn't tell any more. "You look tense," he murmured, too low for her mother to hear. "Relax, your mother needs this. She needs structure." Structure. That was what he always called it. Zoe swallowed, tasting something bitter that wasn't the wine. "I'm fine." He glanced at her with a small smile, the kind that showed everyone else he was attentive. "You're always fine." It wasn't a compliment. It was an expectation. Zoe's phone lay face down beside her plate. The screen remained dark. No texts. No surprises. Her life, arranged in neat lines. Safe lines. That was the point. Her mother rose and moved toward the window, the hem of her dress whispering along the rug. "She's very good," she said, looking out at the rain like it held answers. "Everyone says so." "Everyone," Zoe repeated softly. Her mother turned. "Yes? Everyone who matters." The candlelight caught the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. Lines Zoe had never noticed as lines before, only as proof that her mother had been smiling for years in rooms that didn't deserve her. Zoe's chest tightened in a way she didn't like. She was good at ignoring discomfort until it became a skill. But tonight it felt like the walls were too close. She stood abruptly and carried the wine bottle to the counter to refill glasses they didn't need refilling, just to move, just to give her body something to do. Her heels clicked against marble in a rhythm that sounded like impatience. Her mother's gaze followed her. "Zoe." Zoe poured. "Yes?" A pause. The kind that pretended to be casual. "You'll be respectful." Zoe let out a faint, humorless laugh. "I'm always respectful." Her boyfriend chuckled as if it were a joke. "She is." Zoe didn't look at him. She felt his confidence like a weight. Her mother's voice softened, but the steel didn't. Not polite, respectful. Zoe set the bottle down a fraction too hard. "Who is she exactly? Some shark?" Her mother's mouth curved. "No, she's precise." Precise. Another word that sounded like control. Zoe stared at the reflection of the chandelier in the glossy countertop. "You've met her. I've spoken with her. She came highly recommended." Her mother's gaze held Zoe's now, steady and unblinking. "She understands what's at stake." That was the real sentence. That was the one that mattered. "What's at stake?" Zoe turned back to the table, glass in hand, and sat down more carefully this time, as if she could lower herself into normalcy. Her boyfriend touched her wrist briefly, light, familiar, meaningless. "You know," he said, voice warm. "Once your mother is free of this mess, things will settle. It'll be good for everyone." Everyone meant him. His family. Their plans. Their future photo spread. Their engagement announcement timed around market cycles and public sentiment. Zoe stared at the candle flame again. It wavered, then steadied. "If you've ever wanted something you shouldn't, you understand." The thought came without warning, like a hand on the back of her neck. Zoe didn't know where it had come from, only that it didn't belong in a room like this. She exhaled slowly. The doorbell rang. It wasn't loud. Nothing in this house was loud, but it cut through the air with surgical clarity. Zoe's mother's shoulders lifted, then settled. "That's her." Zoe didn't move. Her boyfriend set his napkin down, all smooth charm. "Oh, get it. No," Zoe said, too quick. Too sharp. He paused, eyebrows lifting in mild surprise. "Zoe?" Zoe's mother glanced at her, and for a heartbeat Zoe felt caught, like a girl again, like someone who could still be read. Zoe stood. "I'll do it." She walked through the hallway with a careful pace, as if her body were trying to outrun something her mind refused to name. The paintings on the walls blurred in her peripheral vision. Family portraits. Fundraisers. Summer houses. Smiles that looked expensive and faintly exhausted. At the front door, she pressed her palm to the wood for a second longer than necessary. "Don't be dramatic." She opened it. The woman on the other side was framed by rain and city light. No umbrella in sight. Dark hair pulled back neatly, not severe but intentional. A black coat that fit like it had been tailored for her alone. Water droplets clung to the fabric, catching the porch light in tiny flashes. Her face was familiar. Not in a polite way. Not in a "have we met at a gala" way. In a way that made Zoe's stomach drop. The woman's eyes lifted, and the world did something quiet and cruel. It narrowed. "Zoe," she said. It wasn't an introduction. It wasn't even a greeting. It was recognition. Zoe's throat went dry. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the door. Camille. Camille Moreau. The name rose from Zoe's memory like a bruise you don't feel until you touch it. Camille's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. Not exactly. "You're answering the door," Camille said, voice calm. "That's unexpected." Zoe felt heat climb her neck, fast and unwanted. "So are you." Camille's gaze flicked over Zoe's face as if reading what time had done. What 5 years had changed? What 5 years hadn't? "May I come in?" Camille asked. Zoe didn't move aside immediately. Behind Zoe, the house hummed with quiet money and quiet expectations. In front of her, rain breathed cold air into the doorway, carrying a scent, clean and sharp, like bergamot and something darker underneath. Zoe could feel her pulse in her wrists. "You were my mother's lawyer," she said, the words landing flat, as if she could make them harmless by stating them. Camille's eyes didn't blink. "Yes, you could have warned me." A small pause, just long enough to be deliberate. "I assumed she would." Zoe's jaw tightened. She hated how controlled Camille sounded. Hated how she stood there as if she belonged on this doorstep. Camille's gaze dropped briefly to Zoe's hand gripping the door. Then back up. "Zoe," Camille said again, softer this time. "I'm here for your mother." Zoe swallowed. "Right." Camille held out a slim, leather folder. The edge of it brushed Zoe's fingers when Zoe took it, barely a touch. A minimal transfer of weight. Paper. Leather. Nothing. And yet Zoe's skin responded like it had been warned. Too close. The phrase flashed through her mind, sharp as a needle. Zoe stepped back abruptly, making space. "Fine. Come in." Camille crossed the threshold with quiet grace, shaking off a few raindrops with a single movement that somehow managed to look intentional. The sound of her heels on the marble was different than Zoe's. Quieter, more certain, like she didn't need to announce her presence. Zoe turned and led her toward the dining room without looking back. If she looked back, she might see something she didn't want to know. When they entered, Zoe's mother straightened slightly, her expression smoothing into social elegance. Her boyfriend rose with a bright smile, hand already extended, ready to charm. "Moreau," he said. "I've heard a lot about you." Camille's gaze flicked to him, just long enough to register his presence, not long enough to invite him in. She shook his hand politely, but there was no warmth in it. Not hostility. Just distance. "Thank you," Camille said. "And you are?" He said his name, and Zoe felt the familiar weight of it. The way it carried influence without saying anything. The way people reacted to it before they reacted to him. Camille didn't react at all. Zoe watched Camille's lack of reaction, and felt something inside her shift, subtle and unsettling. Her mother approached Camille with calm authority. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course," Camille said. "I prefer to start while there's still room to control the narrative." The narrative. Zoe's stomach tightened again. Her mother nodded, almost approving. "Good." Camille removed her coat and draped it over the back of a chair with practiced precision. The sleeves fell perfectly. Nothing wrinkled. Nothing looked accidental. Zoe hated that she noticed. Camille sat and opened the leather folder. The table's candlelight caught on the fine edge of her pen, the metal reflecting a thin line of gold. She didn't rush. She didn't fidget. She didn't look like someone who had ever been nervous in her life. Zoe sat across from her and forced her posture into stillness. Her boyfriend's knee found hers again beneath the table. Zoe resisted the urge to pull away. Her mother started speaking, names, dates, details of accounts and properties, her voice steady, controlled. Zoe listened and nodded at the right moments, performing attentiveness while her attention kept slipping to Camille's hands. Camille's hands were quiet, strong-looking in a subtle way. No flashy rings. Just clean nails and a faint scar near one knuckle that Zoe didn't remember from college. Zoe's mind, traitorous, offered a flash. Camille's hand in hers once, passing a pen during a lecture. Camille's fingers brushing her palm like it meant something. Zoe blinked hard. Camille made notes without looking up. "He moved funds," she said calmly, and the table went colder. "Not just to shield them, to punish you." Zoe's mother's mouth tightened. "He wouldn't." Camille lifted her gaze then, not to Zoe's mother, but to Zoe. "Just 1 second. Just enough." The look landed like a match struck in a room full of dry paper. Zoe's breath caught. Camille's expression didn't change, but her eyes held something Zoe couldn't name without admitting too much. Then Camille looked back down. "He would," she said, voice even. "Men like him do. And men like him get away with it when women prioritize appearing graceful over being protected." Zoe's boyfriend let out a small laugh, strained. "That's a bit." Camille's gaze lifted again, this time to him. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't rude. It was simply final. He stopped speaking like his own mouth no longer belonged to him. Zoe's mother exhaled slowly. "What do we do?" Camille turned a page. "We stop being polite. We start being exact." Exact. Precise. Controlled. Zoe's throat tightened. Something about hearing it from Camille made Zoe feel exposed. Like Camille could see every compromise Zoe had ever made and call it what it was. Beneath the table, Zoe's boyfriend's knee pressed more firmly into hers, as if grounding her or reminding her. Zoe's skin crawled. Camille continued talking, laying out steps like chess moves, timelines, legal angles, public statements. It was clinical. Efficient. Necessary. And still, Zoe felt it, the destabilizing current underneath it all, running through the room with every word Camille spoke, with every small pause where Zoe imagined what Camille might say if this were not business, if this were not her mother, if this were not her life on display. Camille shifted her pen and reached for Zoe's mother's water glass by mistake. She paused, the motion stopping midair. A tiny human imperfection. Almost nothing. "Sorry," Camille said quietly, and her fingers brushed the side of the glass as she pulled back. Zoe's gaze fell to that hand. The scar. The steadiness. The way Camille corrected herself without apology beyond the one word. "I mean," Zoe felt the start of a breath she couldn't finish. Camille's eyes flicked to Zoe's face again, as if she'd sensed it. The faintest lift of Camille's brow. Zoe's cheeks warmed. Too close, Zoe thought again, sharper now. Too close to the past. Too close to a version of herself that had once believed she could want something and survive wanting it. Her mother's voice cut in. "Zoe, darling, are you listening?" Zoe snapped her attention back, forcing a calm smile. "Yes, of course." Camille's pen paused. Zoe felt it like a touch. Camille looked down at her notes and continued. But the air remained altered, like the room had absorbed something and would not give it back. The meeting moved on. Papers were signed. Decisions were made. Her mother's face stayed composed, but Zoe noticed the tremor in her mother's fingers when she set the pen down. Zoe noticed because Zoe knew tremors, the small betrayals of bodies trying to keep up with their own masks. At the end, Zoe's boyfriend stood and offered Camille his hand again, still trying to recover control. "We appreciate your help." Camille accepted the handshake, polite. "Of course." Then her gaze slid to Zoe, and the handshake ended. Zoe rose too, because she had to do something with her body. Because sitting was starting to feel like surrender. "I'll walk you out," Zoe heard herself say. Her boyfriend's smile tightened. "Zoe, it's fine," Zoe cut in softly. She didn't look at him. Camille gathered her folder and coat and followed Zoe into the hallway. The lights were lower here, warmer, more intimate. The house smelled like candles and old money, and a faint perfume Zoe had worn for years because her mother approved of it. Camille's scent cut through it, clean, sharp, rain-damp, unfamiliar in a way that made Zoe's lungs open, as if she'd been holding her breath for 5 years. They walked side by side, close enough that Zoe could feel Camille's presence as heat. Not actual heat. Something quieter. Too close. At the front door, Zoe reached for the handle and paused. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, grounding herself. "You didn't tell me," Zoe said, voice low. Camille's eyes lifted. "Tell you what?" "That it would be you." Camille's expression softened by 1/2 degree. So small it might have been imagined. But Zoe felt it. Zoe always felt what she wasn't supposed to. "I didn't know you'd be here," Camille said. Then, after a beat, "I assumed you wouldn't be." Zoe's throat tightened. "Why would you assume that?" Camille held Zoe's gaze. The rain outside pressed against the glass like a hush. "Because," Camille said quiet, "you built a life that doesn't leave room for surprises." Zoe's chest constricted. "That's not..." "No. Not that." She tried again, steadier. "That's not fair." Camille's mouth curved faintly. "Isn't it?" Zoe should have opened the door. Zoe should have ended the conversation. Zoe should have stayed safe inside the lines. Instead, she stood there, hand still on the handle, and let the silence stretch. Camille's gaze dropped, briefly, to Zoe's hand, to the tension in her fingers, to the way Zoe held the door as if it were a boundary she could control. Then Camille looked up again. "What are you doing here, Zoe?" Camille asked softly. The question made no sense on the surface. They were in Zoe's house. Zoe lived here. Zoe belonged here. But Camille wasn't asking about geography. Zoe's pulse hammered. Her mouth went dry. "I'm here," Zoe said, forcing the words out, "because I'm supposed to be." Camille's eyes didn't flinch. "And are you?" Zoe couldn't answer without breaking something. The sound of footsteps came from the dining room, her boyfriend, moving closer. Zoe felt it before she saw him. The pressure of the life she'd chosen approaching like a closing door. Camille heard it too. Her gaze flicked over Zoe's shoulder, then returned. For a moment, the two of them stood in a narrow pocket of quiet, suspended between past and present, between obligation and desire. Camille stepped back slightly, just enough to restore distance. Professional distance. Safe distance. Too close, Zoe thought, and this time it wasn't a warning. It was a confession. Zoe opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying rain and city sound. Camille slipped her coat on, movement smooth but not careless. She paused on the threshold, her hand brushing the doorframe lightly as she turned. "I'll send your mother the timeline," Camille said, voice even. Zoe nodded. "Okay." Camille hesitated, one heartbeat. The smallest break in her precision. "And so," Camille added. Zoe's breath caught despite herself. Camille's eyes held hers. "Try not to disappear inside your own life." Zoe's boyfriend appeared behind her then, his presence filling the hallway with polite authority. "Moreau," he said, tone smooth. "Thank you again." Camille gave him a nod that didn't invite conversation. Then she looked at Zoe one last time. It wasn't longing. Not openly. It was something more dangerous than longing. It was certainty. Camille stepped into the rain and walked away. Zoe closed the door with a careful hand as if shutting out weather. But she couldn't shut out what had entered the house. Her boyfriend's voice came from behind her, light but edged. Well, that was interesting. Zoe didn't turn right away. She stared at the faint, damp imprint Camille's shoes had left on the marble. Small dark crescents that would dry and vanish like they'd never existed. Her throat tightened. Something had shifted and she didn't know how to shift back. Zoe finally turned, forcing her face into calm. It's just business. Her boyfriend's eyes searched hers. Is it? Zoe held his gaze and felt, for the first time in years, the fragile edge of her own performance. Too close. And now, no matter what she did, she knew she would hear Camille's voice again. Not because Camille would chase her, but because Zoe's own mind already had. The next morning, Zoe woke with the oddest sensation, as if the night hadn't ended cleanly. Her bedroom was still. The sheets were cool where her boyfriend had slept, one arm thrown across the pillow like he owned the space even in unconsciousness. Outside, the city moved in muted gray, traffic far below, rain reduced to a mist that clung to glass. Zoe lay on her back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of expensive HVAC. She tried to catalog what mattered. Her mother's divorce. The timeline. The narrative. She tried not to catalog the sound of a woman's voice saying her name like it meant something. Try not to disappear inside your own life. Zoe shut her eyes, as if that could erase it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email subject line lit the screen in stark white. Lancaster with Lancaster. Draft statement, media containment plan. Zoe's throat tightened. She didn't open it right away. She let the screen dim, then wake again, then dim, as if hesitation could be disguised as patience. Beside her, her boyfriend stirred and reached for her waist without opening his eyes. His hand settled there, familiar. Automatic. The touch had once felt like reassurance. Now it felt like placement. You're up early, he mumbled. Zoe stared ahead. There's a lot going on. He kissed her shoulder, quick and absent. We'll handle it. We always do. We? Zoe turned her head slightly, watching his profile, handsome, polished, safe in the way of someone who'd never had to build safety from scratch. He offered her a small smile, the kind that could charm boardrooms and mothers and strangers on the street. Coffee? He asked. Zoe nodded, because nodding cost less than speaking. When he left the room, Zoe sat up and reached for her phone. She opened the email. It was precise. Bullet points. Timeline. Risk analysis. Suggested phrases. Red lines drawn neatly through the mess of her mother's marriage. The language was clean enough to cut. Zoe scrolled, fingers steady, and found her own name woven into the strategy like a thread she hadn't agreed to tie. Zoe Lancaster, to remain publicly supportive. Await visible alignment with father's narrative. Maintain neutral, family-forward tone. Zoe stared at the sentence until the words blurred. Her mother's divorce wasn't just her mother's divorce. It was a social event. A business ripple. A political maneuver. It was already being weighed by people who had never met her mother and would never care whether she cried in private. Zoe swallowed hard. A second email arrived. Confirm tonight's meeting. 7:30 p.m. No signature needed. The sender was enough. Zoe hovered over the reply box. Her thumb rested on the screen, uncertain. I'll be there. She typed it, then erased it. Too eager. She typed again. Confirmed. She hit send before she could overthink it. The message vanished into the digital ether. Her chest remained tight. In the kitchen, her boyfriend moved around as if the apartment belonged to him. He spoke into his phone while grinding coffee beans, voice low, the cadence of someone always handling something important. Zoe watched him from the doorway. His hair was still slightly messy from sleep. It should have made him look more human. It didn't. He glanced up. Hey, you okay? Zoe's mouth lifted into that practiced half-smile. Just tired. Come here, he said, holding out his arm. Zoe stepped forward and let herself be pulled in. The embrace looked right. It always did. His body was warm, his grip confident. He kissed her forehead as if closing a deal. You don't have to stress, he murmured. Your mother has counsel now. Zoe's eyes drifted to the counter, to the neat row of mugs, to the shallow bowl of fruit that was replaced weekly by the building staff. Everything in her life was curated. Nothing in it was wild. The problem was that a part of her had begun to crave the wild like oxygen. I'm fine, Zoe said again. Her boyfriend leaned back to look at her. You're getting quiet. Zoe held his gaze and felt the ache of wanting to say something true. I'm just thinking, she replied. About what? The answer rose immediately, sharp and dangerous. About her. Zoe swallowed and chose the safer truth. About my mom. I bet. Everything. He nodded, satisfied. We'll get through it. After this we can focus on us. Us. Zoe's stomach turned, not with disgust. Something softer, worse. A sadness she hadn't acknowledged until now. She nodded again. The gesture felt like signing her own life in ink that didn't belong to her. The day moved anyway. Zoe went to work. She sat through meetings in glass-walled conference rooms. She answered emails. She smiled at colleagues who complimented her dress and asked after her mother with the easy curiosity people reserve for high society disasters. She gave them the version of herself they expected. But all day, something kept catching in her mind like a song she didn't want stuck in her head. A name. A pause. A look. Too close. By the time she returned to her mother's house that evening, the city had turned colder. The lights of the skyline glittered like distant, indifferent stars. Zoe's heels clicked across the marble foyer as she entered, shedding her coat and composure in the same motion. In the living room, her mother sat with a glass of water, and no makeup, her hair pinned back in a way that made her look younger and more tired. She was staring at nothing, as if nothing had been staring back for weeks. You're early, her mother said. Zoe glanced at the clock. Am I? Her mother looked at her with a sharp gentleness. You never come early for anything you don't want to do. Zoe's throat tightened. I'm here for you. Her mother's gaze softened, then hardened again in that way women learn to do when they couldn't afford softness. Good. Zoe moved to sit beside her and reached for her mother's hand. For a moment, they sat in a kind of quiet that wasn't empty, just full of things neither of them wanted to say. Then the doorbell rang. Zoe's body reacted before she moved. A subtle tightening in her stomach. A heat that rose into her chest like a flare. She hated that it happened. She hated that she didn't want it to stop. Her mother stood. I'll get it, I will, Zoe said too quickly again. Her mother studied her for a beat, then nodded once, as if letting Zoe have this small illusion of control. Zoe walked to the door with measured steps, telling herself she was calm, telling herself she was fine. She opened it. Camille stood there without rain this time. No damp on her coat, no droplets in her hair. She looked like she'd stepped out of a private car and into Zoe's life with equal ease. A dark turtleneck under a tailored blazer, hair swept back, lips neutral. Her eyes flicked to Zoe's face. It was 1 second. It was nothing. It was everything. Good evening, Camille said. Zoe's throat went tight. You're on time. Camille's mouth curved faintly. So are you. Zoe stepped back. Come in. Camille entered, and the air changed again, subtle, immediate. It wasn't perfume or presence alone. It was memory moving through a hallway that had been built to hold only the present. As Camille passed, her sleeve brushed Zoe's wrist. Barely a graze. Fabric on skin. Zoe's breath caught. She hated that too. Camille's gaze flicked down as if she'd noticed Zoe's reaction. Then she looked away, composed as if nothing had happened. Zoe followed her into the study, where the divorce binder sat on the desk like a sealed confession. Her mother entered behind them, shoulders squared now, the way she always did before facing an audience. Camille opened her folder and began, voice calm. Your husband's counsel has moved faster than expected, she said, setting documents on the desk with careful alignment. They've already briefed 2 outlets off record. Her mother's jaw tightened. How do you know? Camille's gaze was steady. Because they wanted you to know. It's pressure. Zoe leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed. The books here were curated too. Law, art, history, a few novels. Zoe's mother liked to pretend she read. Zoe's eyes drifted over spines without seeing them. Her boyfriend arrived a few minutes later, stepping into the study like he belonged there. He greeted Zoe's mother with a kiss on the cheek, and Camille with a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. Camille, he said, testing the name. Camille shook his hand politely. Good evening. He sat beside Zoe without asking, his knee pressing against hers. Zoe's body stiffened on reflex. Camille didn't miss it. She didn't look at Zoe's knee. She didn't look at their bodies touching. She simply paused for half a beat, just long enough to register. And then continued. We need a statement by tomorrow morning, Camille said. If we don't fill the space, the rumor will. Zoe's mother exhaled. I don't want this to be a circus. Camille nodded once. Then we keep it tight, simple, no emotion. Zoe's boyfriend chuckled lightly. That's always been your strength. Zoe didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the paper. Camille slid toward her mother. Camille's pen tapped once against the page. You'll say this was a private decision after thoughtful consideration. You'll emphasize respect. You'll avoid blame. And what about Zoe? Her boyfriend asked smoothly, as if Zoe were a brand asset. Zoe's stomach tightened. Camille's eyes lifted and met his. Zoe should not be used as a shield. The temperature in the room shifted. Zoe's boyfriend's smile sharpened. No one said shield, but public perception matters. Camille's voice didn't change. Public perception matters. That we don't give them what they want. And what do they want? Zoe's mother asked. Camille glanced at Zoe briefly. Not long enough to be obvious, but long enough to be felt. They want a story about women losing control, she said. We don't give them that. Zoe's breath caught at the phrase. Women losing control. Her boyfriend's knee pressed harder into hers. It was a silent reminder. Don't say anything, don't be anything, don't show. Zoe's skin prickled. Camille shifted a document toward Zoe's mother and reached for another. Her hand moved with quiet certainty. When she handed the next page across the desk, her fingers brushed Zoe's for the briefest moment, unavoidable, accidental, the kind of contact that would mean nothing in any other room. Zoe's hand flinched, then steadied. Camille's touch was warm. Zoe's skin remembered it a second longer than it should have. Zoe's chest tightened. Her pulse jumped, sharp and humiliating. No. Not this. Not now. Camille withdrew her hand smoothly, as if nothing had happened. But her eyes flicked to Zoe's face, and Zoe had the sudden dizzying sense that Camille could see beneath her skin. Zoe looked away first. Her boyfriend didn't notice, or pretended not to. Camille continued speaking, outlining the plan. Zoe listened, nodded when necessary, stayed silent. But her body felt awake, in a way it hadn't in years. Like a nerve had been pressed, and kept pressed. Outside, the world continued to move. Zoe's phone buzzed twice with work notifications. The city's low hum seeped through the glass. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed softly. Normal life, continuing. And yet, Zoe's mind slipped backwards without permission. A lecture hall 5 years ago, sunlight cutting through dusty windows. Camille sitting beside her, thigh pressed to hers on a narrow seat, because there wasn't enough room. Zoe pretending she didn't feel it. Camille whispering a joke into her ear, breath warm against Zoe's skin. Zoe had laughed then. Not because the joke was funny, but because Camille was too close and Zoe didn't know what else to do with the sensation. Too close. Zoe blinked hard, present again. Her mother was asking a question. Her boyfriend was watching Camille like a competitor, not a professional. Camille answered calmly, then gathered her papers. That's the framework, she said. I'll send the final draft within the hour. Her mother nodded, the relief on her face almost imperceptible. Thank you. Camille hesitated just slightly, then looked at Zoe's mother with something softer than professional distance. You're doing the right thing. Zoe's mother's eyes flickered. Am I? Camille's voice stayed steady. Yes. That single word sat in the room like a hand on the back of Zoe's neck. Zoe didn't know why it affected her. She only knew it did. The meeting ended. Zoe's mother left first, claiming exhaustion. Zoe's boyfriend rose too, glancing at Zoe with a look that suggested they should leave together. Zoe didn't move. I'll be a minute, she said. Her boyfriend's smile tightened. Zoe, I just want... She swallowed. I want to check something with Camille. For Mom. The lie came easily. Too easily. Her boyfriend studied her. Then he nodded once, a small gesture of permission disguised as understanding. Don't be long. He left. The door clicked softly behind him, and the quiet that followed was suddenly different. Less staged. More dangerous. Camille closed her folder with care, then looked up at Zoe. They were alone in the study now. The candlelight from the hallway spilled in gently, catching the edges of Camille's face, softening her sharpness just enough to make Zoe's chest tighten. Zoe crossed her arms, forcing distance into her posture. You didn't have to shut him down like that. Camille's brow lifted slightly. I didn't shut him down. I answered him. Zoe's jaw tightened. You know what I mean. Camille held Zoe's gaze, unhurried. Does he always speak about you like you're part of the negotiation? Zoe's throat went dry. He's involved. Camille's eyes flicked over Zoe's face. Involved? Or entitled? Zoe flinched, annoyed at herself for reacting. You don't get to come back into my life and judge it. Camille's mouth curved faintly, not amused, more like sad. I'm not judging, I'm noticing. Zoe's chest tightened. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her elbows, the same nervous habit she'd had at the dinner table. Camille's gaze dropped briefly to Zoe's fingers, then back up. You're still doing that? Zoe froze. Doing what? That, Camille said quietly. Holding yourself together like it's the only thing keeping you alive. Zoe swallowed hard. The room felt too warm suddenly. Or maybe she was. Why are you here? Zoe asked, voice low. Really? Camille's eyes didn't blink. For your mother. Zoe's laugh came out sharp. Don't insult me. Camille's gaze stayed steady, but something in her expression shifted. Small, restrained. I'm not. Zoe stepped closer before she realized she'd moved. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel the line where touch could happen. Her heart hammered. Say something. Say the right thing. Instead, Zoe heard herself whisper, You knew it would be me opening the door. Camille's breath changed, subtle, almost imperceptible. A fraction deeper. I didn't know, Camille said. Then she paused, like choosing honesty carefully. But I hoped. The word hit Zoe like a physical thing. Hoped. Zoe's skin prickled. Her mouth opened, then closed. Camille looked at her, eyes clear and dangerous. You're not as invisible as you think so. Zoe's pulse spiked. Her body felt suddenly, vividly present. Blood, breath, heat in her chest. She wanted to step back. She didn't. Too close, she thought, and the phrase didn't warn her this time. It asked her what she was going to do about it. Zoe's phone buzzed in her pocket, one sharp vibration, then another. The outside world insisting itself back into the room. Zoe didn't pull it out. Camille's gaze flicked to the pocket, then back to Zoe's face. He's waiting. Zoe's throat tightened. I know. Camille's expression softened by a fraction. Then go. Zoe stared at her, frustrated by the steadiness, by the restraint, by the fact that Camille wasn't reaching for her, wasn't pleading, wasn't pushing. Camille didn't move. She simply stood there, an old truth in a new suit, waiting for Zoe to decide what Zoe had always refused to decide. Zoe's breath came in shallow. I hate this, Zoe whispered. Camille's voice was quiet. No? Zoe's eyes narrowed. What? Camille stepped closer, only a half step. Close enough that Zoe could feel the warmth of her, close enough that Zoe's body reacted without permission. Camille's voice dropped, careful. You hate that you want it. Zoe's chest tightened hard, like something inside her had been named aloud. Her eyes stung. Not with tears, not yet, but with the threat of them. She turned away abruptly, grabbing her coat from the chair, needing a task, a movement, a way out of her own skin. When she faced Camille again, her expression was controlled, almost cold. Send the draft, Zoe said. I'll review it. Camille nodded once. I will. Zoe walked to the door, hand on the knob, and paused. She didn't look back, because looking back felt like surrender. Behind her, Camille's voice came softly, almost like a memory. Zoe. Zoe's fingers tightened on the knob. Camille didn't say anything else. The silence held the rest. Zoe opened the door and stepped into the hallway where her boyfriend's footsteps waited, where her life continued in neat lines. But her pulse didn't slow. Her skin didn't forget. And as Zoe walked away, she realized something with a sudden tightening dread. The meetings weren't just legal. They were inevitable. And she wasn't sure how many more good nights she could survive without breaking something she'd spent 5 years building. Zoe's boyfriend drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting possessively on the center console, fingers tapping in a relaxed rhythm that suggested patience. It wasn't patience. It was confidence. The city slid past in a blur of wet asphalt and taillights. Zoe stared out the window, watching her own reflection appear and disappear in the glass, her face floating over the lights like a ghost that had learned to look alive. You were quiet, he said. Zoe didn't turn. It was a long meeting. He glanced at her. I saw the way she looked at you. Zoe's stomach tightened. She didn't, Zoe said quickly, too quickly. He smiled, soft but sharp at the edges. Zoe, come on. The car stopped at a red light. His gaze held hers for a beat longer than necessary. You don't like her, he continued, voice still calm, still almost kind. That's fine. But we need her. Your mother needs her, so be smart. Zoe let the word land in her chest like a weight. Be smart. She'd been smart for 5 years. She'd been smart when she chose a boyfriend whose last name opened doors. Smart when she smiled through dinners she didn't want. Smart when she ignored the ache that came from living a life built for other people's comfort. Smart when she stopped talking to Camille. Zoe's fingers curled in her lap. I'm always smart. That's why I love you, he said, like it was settled. The light turned green. The car moved. Zoe watched the rain streak the windshield and thought, with a sudden unwanted clarity, that love shouldn't feel like a contract. When they reached their building, he walked her inside, kissed her cheek in the lobby where security could see, and reminded her of their Friday dinner with his parents as if it were a calendar appointment, and not a life sentence. I'll pick you up at 6, he said. Zoe nodded. When she stepped into her apartment alone, the quiet hit her like a wave. Not peaceful. Hollow. No. Her phone buzzed. An email from Camille. Final draft statement, media containment plan attached. Zoe stared at the sender line for a long moment before opening it, as if the act itself might expose her. The statement was clean. Respectful. Carefully bloodless. Zoe scrolled slowly, eyes snagging on phrases that sounded like someone describing a storm from behind glass. After thoughtful consideration, with mutual respect. Private family matters. A desire to move forward. Zoe swallowed, tasting bitterness again. She pictured her mother saying those words in front of cameras. Graceful. Composed. Alone. Zoe's chest tightened. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text, not from Camille. From her mother. Can you come early tomorrow? I need you here before she arrives. Zoe's fingers hovered. Of course. She sent it. The outside world continued moving. Zoe knew it because her phone wouldn't stop reminding her. A notification from a news app. A ping from a colleague. A calendar alert. And then, a new headline pushed to her screen with ruthless timing. Socialite Lancaster divorce. Insider claims something big is coming. Zoe stared at it, a cold pressure building behind her ribs. She clicked. It was thin. Speculative. Half-sourced. But there it was, the beginning of the circus her mother had feared. Zoe shut her eyes and exhaled slowly. Too close, she thought, and the phrase felt like it had new meaning now. Not just Camille. Not just desire. The whole situation was too close to becoming something Zoe couldn't manage. She set her phone down and walked to the kitchen as if movement could rearrange her thoughts. She filled a glass of water. Drank. Barely tasted it. In the mirror above the sink she studied her own face. Perfect hair. Perfect skin. Perfect expression. A mask. Zoe pressed her fingertips lightly to her throat, feeling the rapid beat of her pulse. Feeling how alive her body had become in the last 24 hours for reasons she refused to name. Her phone buzzed again. A second text from Camille, this time short and formal. We need to adjust. Call me when you're alone. Zoe stared at it. She was alone. She didn't call. Not yet. She typed, "What happened?" The reply came quickly. A leak. Someone is feeding pieces to the press. Your mother can't be surprised tomorrow. Zoe's throat tightened. Her mind flicked immediately to her father, cold, strategic, enjoying the power of destabilizing her mother. But another thought slipped in, unwanted and sharp. Her boyfriend. His family. The magnate. People with influence who liked controlling outcomes. Zoe's fingers went cold. She typed, "I'll be there early." Camille's response was instant. Good. And Zoe, don't let them use you as leverage. Zoe stared at the words until they blurred. She didn't reply. That night she barely slept. She lay in bed with the city light leaking through the curtains in pale, restless stripes. When she closed her eyes, she didn't see her boyfriend. She saw Camille's face in the doorway. Not smiling. Not pleading. Certain. Zoe turned onto her side and pressed her cheek to the pillow, as if pressure could quiet her mind. It didn't. In the morning, she arrived at her mother's townhouse before the staff had fully finished opening the curtains. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. It was still, but not calm. More like the pause before thunder. Her mother was already dressed, an elegant cream blouse and trousers that made her look composed enough to withstand cameras. But when Zoe stepped into the living room, she saw the truth. Her mother's hands were shaking as she held her coffee cup. Zoe's chest tightened. "Mom," Zoe said softly. Her mother looked up, eyes bright and hard in a way Zoe recognized, like someone refusing to break, because breaking would be dangerous. "Did you see it?" her mother asked. Zoe nodded. "Yes." Her mother laughed once, short and bitter. "He's not even waiting. He wants to make sure I'm humiliated in public." Zoe crossed the room and sat beside her, knee touching knee. She reached for her mother's hand, wrapping her fingers around it. "You're not going to be humiliated," Zoe said. Her mother stared at her. For a moment Zoe felt the weight of being her mother's daughter, expected to hold the line. "You sound sure," her mother said. Zoe swallowed. "We have Camille." Her mother's gaze sharpened slightly. "Yes, we do." A pause. Then, quieter, "Do you remember her?" Zoe's stomach tightened. "Of course I remember her." Her mother studied Zoe's face with a careful maternal precision that felt uncomfortably similar to Camille's. "Your father used to say she was trouble," her mother murmured. Zoe's breath caught. "He met her." Her mother nodded faintly. "Once. After a fundraiser at your university. You were close then." Zoe looked away. "We were friends." Her mother's expression suggested she didn't believe in simple labels. Zoe's throat tightened. She wished her mother would stop looking at her like that. Like she could see things Zoe hadn't said. The doorbell rang. Zoe's body reacted instantly, heat rising under her skin, pulse tightening in her wrist. Her mother stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her blouse as if getting ready for battle. "That's her." Zoe stood too. "I'll get it." Her mother hesitated, then nodded. Zoe walked to the door with measured steps. She told herself she was calm, that she was only doing what needed to be done. She opened it. Camille stood there with the same controlled stillness she always carried, like her body knew how to occupy space without asking permission. Today she wore a dark charcoal suit, hair swept back, makeup minimal, eyes clear. She looked at Zoe and paused for the briefest moment, just long enough for Zoe to feel it. A shift. Not warmth. Recognition. "Good morning," Camille said. Zoe's throat went dry. "You're early." Camille's mouth curved faintly. "So, are you?" It wasn't flirtation. Not openly. But Zoe felt the sentence land in her body like a touch. Zoe stepped aside. "Come in." Camille entered and the air changed again. Rainless today, but still altered. Her scent reached Zoe as she passed, clean and sharp, like something Zoe couldn't categorize, but her body wanted to memorize. Too close, Zoe thought, and the phrase made her pulse spike. Camille glanced toward the living room where Zoe's mother waited, then back to Zoe. "Before we start," Camille said quietly, "I need you to tell me something." Zoe blinked, thrown. "What?" Camille's voice lowered. "Is he here?" Zoe's stomach dropped. "My father?" Camille's eyes didn't blink. "Your boyfriend." Zoe's jaw tightened. "No?" Camille exhaled a fraction, as if relieved. The subtlety of it made Zoe's chest tighten. She hated noticing. She hated that it mattered. Camille's gaze held Zoe's for one beat longer. "Good," Camille said, and then she walked toward the living room like a professional walking into war. Zoe followed, pulse humming. The meeting began the moment Camille sat down. She placed her folder on the coffee table and opened it, revealing documents printed and highlighted with ruthless clarity. "They leaked a partial draft," Camille said to Zoe's mother, voice calm. "Someone gave them just enough to stir speculation." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Camille didn't answer immediately. She looked at Zoe's mother, then at Zoe. "The question isn't who," Camille said. "It's what they gain." Zoe's mother's jaw tightened. "Control." Camille nodded. "Exactly." The word hung in the air. Zoe's mother sat straighter, anger sharpening her features. "He thinks he can control me." Camille's voice softened by half a degree. "He can't. Not if you stop trying to be the good one." Zoe's mother's eyes flickered and Zoe saw it. The fear beneath the anger. The fear of being seen as messy, emotional, wrong. Zoe's chest tightened. Camille slid a paper across the table. We adjust the statement. We take the power back. Her mother stared at the page. This is harsher, it's honest, Camille replied. Zoe watched her mother read, watched her mother's fingers tighten on the paper. Camille continued, steady. We keep it elegant, but we don't pretend the harm didn't happen. Her mother's lips parted slightly, and Zoe realized her mother might cry, not from sadness, but from relief. Relief at being given permission to stop smoothing everything over. Zoe's throat tightened. The outside world didn't pause for this private moment. Zoe's phone buzzed again, another headline alert. Another rumor. Another whisper of spectacle. Camille's eyes flicked briefly toward Zoe's phone, then back to Zoe's mother. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. The press was the third person in the room now, unseen but present. Zoe's mother set the paper down. I don't want Zoe dragged into this. Zoe's pulse jumped. Camille's gaze lifted to Zoe, quiet and direct. Then Zoe cannot be used as leverage. Zoe's chest tightened again at the repetition of the idea. It wasn't just strategy. It was a boundary. Her mother's eyes shifted to Zoe. Your father will try. Zoe felt her skin go cold. He can't. Her mother's gaze sharpened. He can. Zoe swallowed hard. She wanted to say something that made it untrue. She couldn't. Camille's voice cut in, precise. That's why we plan for it. Zoe stays neutral publicly. But privately she stays close to you. Zoe's mother nodded slowly. Yes. Zoe stared at Camille's hands as she organized pages, her movements controlled, almost gentle in their precision. The faint scar near her knuckle caught Zoe's attention again. Zoe's mind, traitorous, offered another flash. College, the library, Camille's hand sliding a book toward her, their fingers touching over the spine. Zoe pretending she didn't feel it. Zoe blinked. Camille looked up at her. Zoe. Zoe's breath caught. Yes. Camille's voice remained professional, but her eyes held something else. You need to be careful. Zoe's stomach tightened. Careful of what? Camille paused. A deliberate pause. Careful of thinking you can stand in the middle and not be pulled, Camille said. Zoe's heart hammered. Her mother spoke, cutting through the tension. What do we do next? Camille turned back to her, and the moment between Camille and Zoe snapped back into professionalism like a rubber band. But Zoe felt the sting of it. We move, Camille said. Today. The plan unfolded quickly. A revised statement. A scheduled appearance. A controlled leak to counter his leak. Camille spoke like someone who had done this before. Like she knew how to take chaos and shape it into something survivable. Zoe watched her mother respond, watching her mother straighten into her own power, fueled by Camille's clarity. And Zoe felt, with a tightening dread, that Camille wasn't just saving her mother. Camille was shifting the whole axis of Zoe's world. When the meeting ended, Zoe's mother went upstairs to change again, gathering herself for the day ahead. The staff moved quietly through the room, cleaning empty cups, smoothing pillows, resetting the stage. The outside world kept moving, phones buzzing, headlines forming, reputation turning into currency. Zoe lingered in the living room, staring at the revised statement on the coffee table as if it contained her future. Camille closed her folder and stood, poised to leave. Zoe spoke before she could stop herself. You're good at this. Camille paused. I have to be. Zoe's throat tightened. Does it ever scare you? Camille's gaze lifted to hers. The answer wasn't immediate. The hesitation made Zoe's pulse jump again. Then Camille said quietly, only when it stops scaring me. Zoe's breath caught. Camille's eyes held Zoe's for one beat longer, and Zoe felt the destabilizing shift, subtle but irreversible. Camille wasn't just precise. Camille was human, and that made her more dangerous, not less. Zoe's voice came out softer than she intended. I thought you'd be colder. Camille's mouth curved faintly, a shadow of something old. You used to say I was too warm. Zoe's chest tightened so hard she almost lost breath. The air between them went still. Not empty. Full. Camille stepped closer, only half a step. Close enough for Zoe to feel the warmth of her body without contact. Close enough for Zoe's skin to react, a fine prickling along her arms. Zoe didn't move. Camille's voice dropped, quiet as a secret. Does he make you feel anything? Zoe's stomach dropped. Her mouth went dry. It was a question Zoe hadn't allowed herself to ask. Not in 5 years. Not even alone. Zoe tried to summon a controlled answer. She couldn't. She swallowed, staring at Camille's mouth for one humiliating second, and then forced her gaze back to Camille's eyes. Zoe started. No. Not that. She tried again. That's not your business. Camille's eyes didn't flinch. It becomes my business when it becomes leverage. Zoe's pulse hammered. She hated the logic. She hated that Camille could frame intimacy as strategy and still make Zoe feel exposed. Camille held Zoe's gaze. Zoe. Zoe's throat tightened at the sound of her name, at the way Camille said it like she was touching a bruise. Zoe's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up. Her boyfriend. Where are you? Zoe stared at it. Camille's gaze flicked to the screen and back to Zoe's face. No reaction. No judgment. Just awareness. The outside world, insisting. Zoe's chest tightened. She picked up the phone with fingers that felt too stiff. I have to go, Zoe whispered, and she didn't know whether she meant physically or emotionally. Camille nodded once. I know. Zoe's throat tightened harder. You don't? Camille's expression softened by the smallest measure. Enough to be felt, not enough to be seen by anyone else. I do? Camille said quietly. Zoe stared at her, breath shallow, heart hammering like it wanted to betray her entirely. She wanted to step back. She wanted to step forward. She didn't do either. Too close, she thought again, and this time the phrase tasted like inevitability. Zoe turned toward the hallway, phone in hand, already forming the words she would feed her boyfriend. Something polite, something controlled, something that would keep the lines intact. Behind her, Camille's voice came softly, almost like a warning disguised as gentleness. Zoe, don't let them decide what you feel. Zoe's hand froze on the edge of the doorframe. For a moment she didn't breathe. Then she walked away. And she hated herself for how much she wanted to turn around. Zoe didn't mean to answer Camille's message that night. She meant to ignore it. She meant to let the outside world swallow her back into its careful rhythm. Dinner with her boyfriend's parents, strategic smiles, polite laughter at jokes about mergers and legacy. Instead, she found herself standing on the balcony of her apartment long after the dinner ended, city wind threading through her hair, phone glowing in her hand. We need to talk. Not about the case. About you. Camille's message had arrived an hour earlier. Zoe had stared at it through dessert, through champagne, through her boyfriend's mother complimenting her composure during such a trying time. Her composure. Zoe typed. Deleted. Typed again. Where? The reply came quickly. My office. 10 minutes. Zoe looked at the time. It was late. She shouldn't. She knew that. Her boyfriend was in the shower. The water ran steadily, predictably. Safe. Zoe stepped inside, grabbed her coat, and left without a word. The city air was colder than she expected. It cleared her head but did nothing to steady the tightness in her chest. When she reached Camille's building, the lobby lights were dim. After hours quiet. The receptionist gone. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, her reflection in the mirrored walls pale and too honest. Her pulse didn't slow. When the elevator doors opened, Camille was already standing near the glass wall of her office, city lights spilling behind her like a second skyline. No blazer now. Just a dark silk blouse, sleeves rolled once at the wrist. Zoe stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. You shouldn't have come, Camille said quietly. Zoe's breath caught. You told me to. Camille's gaze held hers. I told you to think. Zoe stepped further into the room. I did. Camille watched her carefully, like she was measuring something fragile. And? Camille asked. Zoe's throat tightened. She hadn't rehearsed the truth. She hadn't rehearsed anything. I can't keep pretending nothing is happening, Zoe said. Camille's jaw shifted slightly. A sign of tension. Nothing is happening. Zoe laughed once, sharp and breathless. You don't believe that. Camille didn't answer. The city hummed outside the glass, indifferent to what was unfolding in the quiet office above it. Zoe walked closer. Not recklessly. Deliberately. Close enough to see the faint shadow under Camille's eyes. Close enough to see the way Camille's breath deepened just slightly when Zoe entered her space. Too close. The phrase flickered through Zoe's mind, but it didn't stop her. You said I built a life that doesn't leave room for surprises, Zoe said softly. Camille's voice stayed steady. You did. Zoe swallowed. And what if I don't want it anymore? That was the shift. Camille's composure fractured by a fraction of a second. Zoe, she warned quietly. The way she said it, not commanding, not pleading, made Zoe's knees weaken. Zoe stepped closer again. Close enough now that the air between them felt warm. I ended things tonight, Zoe said. Camille's eyes flicked to hers sharply. What? Zoe's breath trembled, but her voice didn't. I told him I couldn't do it anymore. Silence. Not disbelief. Not relief. Something heavier. You didn't do that for me, Camille said carefully. Zoe's lips parted. No. And that was the truth. She hadn't done it for Camille. She'd done it because Camille had held up a mirror she couldn't unsee. Camille stepped back a half step. Distance. Professional instinct. This complicates everything, Camille said. Zoe's heart pounded harder. It already was complicated. Camille's hand brushed the edge of her desk, grounding herself. You are my client's daughter, Camille said. Your father will use this. Zoe's voice dropped. He already uses me. That landed. Camille looked at her fully then. Not as counsel. Not as strategist. As a woman looking at another woman standing on a fault line. The air shifted. Zoe felt it. Her skin felt too aware. Her breath too loud. Say it, Zoe whispered. Camille's eyes darkened slightly. Say what? That you feel it too. Camille's control faltered, not visibly to anyone else, but Zoe saw it. Zoe had always seen it. Zoe. Camille exhaled her name like it cost something. Zoe stepped forward and closed the remaining distance. Close enough now that their bodies nearly touched. Camille's breath changed. Zoe could feel it against her cheek. The world outside the glass didn't pause. Cars moved. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Inside the office, time slowed into something fragile. You hated him, Zoe said softly. Camille's gaze didn't waver. I hated watching you disappear. Zoe's chest tightened painfully. You thought I was choosing status, Zoe continued. You were, Camille said. The honesty stung. Zoe swallowed. And what if I choose differently now? Camille's jaw tightened. You don't get to choose me because you're lonely, Camille said. Zoe's voice dropped. I'm not lonely. Camille's eyes flicked down to Zoe's lips and back up. That was it. That was the moment. Not a grand gesture. Not dramatic. Just gravity. Zoe's hand lifted without permission and brushed Camille's wrist. Bare skin. Warm. Camille inhaled sharply. Zoe, she said again, softer now. Zoe didn't step back. If you've ever wanted something you shouldn't, you understand, Zoe whispered. Camille's control finally cracked. Her hand moved to Zoe's waist. Not forceful. Not claiming. Testing. Zoe's breath hitched. Their foreheads almost touched. Tell me to stop, Camille said quietly. Zoe's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. Don't, she breathed. And Camille kissed her. Not hungry. Not frantic. Deliberate. Soft at first. A question. Zoe answered. Her fingers curled into Camille's blouse as their lips met again, deeper this time. The world narrowed into warmth and breath, and the quiet shock of being exactly where she was not supposed to be. Too close. But this time, the phrase dissolved. Camille's hand slid to Zoe's lower back, steadying her as if Zoe might collapse under the weight of her own wanting. The kiss slowed. Deepened. Not rushed. Not careless. Zoe felt something inside her uncoil, 5 years of restraint unraveling in the space between their mouths. When they finally broke apart, they didn't move away. Their foreheads rested together. Breathing aligned. Everything changes now, Camille murmured. Zoe's pulse throbbed in her throat. It already has. Camille's fingers traced a careful line along Zoe's jaw, almost reverent. You don't understand the storm this brings, Camille said. Zoe's voice was steady. Then we stand in it. Camille studied her like she was deciding whether to believe that. The city light caught the faint scar on Camille's knuckle as her hand brushed Zoe's hair back. Zoe leaned into the touch. A surrender. Not of control. Of fear. Their second kiss wasn't careful. It carried heat. Camille's back met the edge of the desk as Zoe moved closer, hands exploring familiar territory that had never been allowed to exist. Their bodies pressed. Breath mingled. Camille's hand slid up, Zoe's spine, fingers firm but slow, as if memorizing. Zoe's skin burned under her touch. Not rushed. Earned. Camille pulled back slightly, searching Zoe's face. "Are you sure?" she asked. Zoe nodded once, breathless. "Yes." Camille kissed her again, slower now, deeper, her hand guiding Zoe gently until the desk was forgotten, until the glass wall and city lights were just blurred witnesses. Their movements remained measured. Clothes loosened, buttons undone with trembling precision. Skin met skin, warm, electric. Zoe gasped softly when Camille's mouth traced the curve of her neck, when Camille's hands mapped the shape of her waist like she had been waiting years to do it. There was no urgency, only gravity. Zoe felt held, seen. When Camille lifted her briefly and sat her on the edge of the desk, Zoe's legs wrapped around her instinctively, pulling her closer. Too close. But now the phrase meant something else. Not danger. Truth. Their first time was not wild. It was intentional. Hands exploring, mouths learning, breath tangled. Zoe felt every sensation like it was new. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was honest. When Camille finally stilled against her, foreheads touching again, Zoe's eyes burned with something dangerously close to tears. "This isn't just desire," Camille said quietly. Zoe shook her head. "I know." They stayed like that for a long moment, until Zoe's phone buzzed violently on the desk behind her. The sound shattered the fragile equilibrium. Zoe froze. Camille stepped back slowly. The screen lit up. Unknown number. Then another buzz. A notification. A news alert. Zoe reached for it with shaking hands. Lancaster heiress ends longtime relationship amid family divorce drama. Zoe's stomach dropped. The headline spread fast. Her father had moved. Camille read it over Zoe's shoulder. Silence thickened. "This is just the beginning," Camille said quietly. Zoe's chest tightened as another alert came in. Speculation. Photos. Commentary. Her phone buzzed again. Her mother. Zoe's breath became shallow. The outside world had noticed, and they had just given it something real. Camille stepped closer again, but this time it wasn't desire in her eyes. It was calculation. "They'll try to connect it," Camille said. "Your breakup, the divorce, me." Zoe's pulse hammered. For the first time since the kiss, fear cut through the warmth. Not of loving Camille, of what loving Camille would cost. Camille's hand found hers. Firm. Grounding. "We don't panic," Camille said. Zoe nodded. But her heart wasn't steady. Outside the glass wall, the city lights flickered like 1,000 watching eyes. And for the first time, Zoe realized that loving Camille would not just change her life. It would expose it. Zoe didn't sleep that night. Not because she was wired with adrenaline, though she was, but because every time she closed her eyes, the world came back in pieces. Camille's mouth against hers, the quiet question in her voice, the warmth of being held like something precious, and then the brutal vibration of a phone lighting up with headlines. Desire didn't vanish when fear arrived. It just learned a new shape. By dawn, the city looked rinsed and unforgiving. Zoe sat on the edge of Camille's couch. Camille's apartment this time, not the office, barefoot, hair loosely gathered, wearing one of Camille's shirts because it had been within reach and because her own dress felt like a costume now. The shirt smelled faintly like clean soap and paper and something metallic she couldn't name. A life built on control. A life built on consequence. Camille stood by the kitchen counter, making coffee like she'd made coffee 1,000 times and never once spilled a drop. But Zoe noticed the way Camille's fingers tightened around the mug as if she needed something to hold. Neither of them had said last night out loud. They didn't have to. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, and Zoe's phone buzzing every few minutes like a living thing. She hadn't opened most of the notifications. She didn't need to. She could feel the public swallowing her name. Camille set a mug in front of her. Black. No sugar. Like Camille didn't believe in softening things unnecessarily. Zoe wrapped both hands around the cup as if heat could anchor her. Camille leaned against the counter, watching her. Not with hunger now. with something sharper. Care. You should go home, Camille said quietly. Zoe's laugh came out thin. Home to what? Camille didn't answer, which somehow hurt more than any answer. Zoe looked down at the mug. The coffee surface trembled faintly with her breath. How bad is it? Camille exhaled once, controlled. It's moving fast. Zoe nodded, as if she'd expected that. As if anything about this could still surprise her. My father will call, Zoe murmured. Camille's eyes tightened. He will. My mother will panic. She won't, Camille corrected gently. She'll get angry. Panic is what they want. Zoe swallowed. And him. Camille's gaze shifted, not away but inward, like she was rehearsing legal realities in her mind. He'll try to reframe it as instability. He'll say you're acting out. He'll say you're being influenced. Zoe's chest tightened. By you? Camille's voice stayed even. Yes. Silence fell again, heavy and alive. Zoe tried to breathe through it. Camille stepped closer and sat on the edge of the coffee table in front of Zoe, close but not touching. Her knees were inches away. The air between them felt warm in a way that was almost cruel. I need to be clear, Camille said. What happened between us? I don't regret it. Zoe's throat tightened. But I won't let it destroy you, Camille continued softly. Zoe's fingers tightened around the mug. You talk like I'm a client. Camille's jaw flexed. I talk like someone who knows how this ends when people don't plan. Zoe stared at her, feeling the ache behind her ribs flare. So you're planning to leave, Zoe said, voice too calm. Camille didn't blink. I am planning to protect you. Zoe's laugh broke out sharp, then died quickly. Protect me from what? Loving you? Camille's expression shifted, pain quickly masked. From being collateral, Camille said. Zoe felt her eyes sting, a humiliating heat behind them. She looked away and swallowed hard, refusing tears like they were weakness. You can't, Zoe whispered. You can't decide this for me. Camille's voice lowered. Zoe, you don't understand what they can do. Zoe turned back, eyes bright now. Then tell me. Camille held her gaze for a long moment, something torn and restrained moving behind her eyes. I've spent my entire career watching powerful men reshape truth, Camille said quietly. They don't need facts. They need timing. They need doubt. They need a woman to look unstable. Zoe's breath caught. And you think I'll look unstable? I think they'll make you look unstable, Camille corrected. Zoe set the mug down too hard. Coffee sloshed slightly over the rim. She didn't care. And what about you? Zoe asked, voice shaking with restrained anger. What do they do to you? Camille's mouth tightened. Zoe leaned forward, closing the distance by instinct. Say it. Camille's breath deepened. They smear me. They call it misconduct. They call it manipulation. They call it ambition. Zoe's chest tightened. And you're afraid. Camille's voice was careful. I'm realistic. Zoe stared at her and felt something in her chest crack open. Not romance, not fantasy. Reality. This was the cost. Not just longing. Not just kissing in the dark. This was the part that made people walk away. Zoe whispered, almost to herself. So this is what it means. Camille's eyes softened, barely. Yes. Zoe stood abruptly and paced toward the window. Her bare feet made no sound on the wood floor. Outside, the city glittered like it didn't care who broke today. Her phone buzzed again on the couch. Zoe didn't pick it up. Camille's voice came quietly behind her. You're shaking. Zoe pressed her palm to the glass. I'm not. Camille didn't argue. She just moved closer, slowly, until Zoe could feel her behind her like warmth without contact. Zoe? Camille said softly. Look at me. Zoe didn't turn. Camille's hand lifted, hesitated, then rested lightly on Zoe's lower back. Just a touch. A grounding point. Zoe's breath hitched. Camille didn't move her hand. Didn't slide it. Didn't take. Just held the line between them like she was proving she could. The touch undid Zoe anyway. Zoe turned slowly and met Camille's eyes. What do you want? Zoe asked, voice small in a way she hated. Camille's throat moved as she swallowed. You already know. Zoe's heart hammered. Say it. Camille's eyes held hers, unwavering now. I want you. The words were simple. Not poetic. not dramatic. Honest. Zoe's eyes burned. Then why are you talking like you're leaving? Camille's hand drifted from Zoe's back to her side, still gentle, still careful. Because wanting you isn't the only thing that matters. Zoe's laugh came out broken. God, I hate how responsible you are. Camille's mouth curved faintly, but it wasn't humor. It was sadness with affection in its bones. You used to hate it too. Zoe swallowed hard. I didn't hate it, I hated that you could see through me. Camille's gaze softened further, dangerously. I still can. Zoe's pulse jumped, heat rising in her chest despite everything. Too close, her mind whispered, but the phrase felt different now. Not warning. Truth. Zoe stepped closer, closing the last inches. Camille didn't move away. Zoe's hand rose to Camille's jaw, thumb brushing the edge of her cheekbone. A familiar place now. A remembered map. You can't protect me by disappearing, Zoe said quietly. Camille's eyes flicked down to Zoe's lips and back up, restraint trembling. I'm not disappearing. Zoe's voice sharpened. Then stop talking like you are. Camille's breath shuddered, just once. Then she nodded, as if conceding something she'd been clinging to. Okay, Camille said. Zoe searched her face. Okay, what? Camille's voice was low. Okay. I'll stay. But we do this with our eyes open. Zoe's throat tightened. I have never wanted anything more with my eyes open. Camille's hand slid to Zoe's waist, steadying her. Zoe leaned in and kissed her, not like last night. Not like ignition. Like agreement. Like choosing. Camille responded slowly, deeply, her hand firm at Zoe's waist, as if holding her in place against the pull of everything outside. When they broke apart, Camille rested her forehead to Zoe's. Then we set boundaries, Camille whispered. Real ones. Zoe exhaled shakily. Tell me. Camille spoke like a lawyer even when her voice carried heat. No public contact, Camille said. Not yet. No messages that can be forwarded, no accidental photos. Zoe's mouth lifted faintly. You think I'm the one who'd be careless? Camille's eyes flicked, a guilty softness. I think you're the one they'll watch. Zoe swallowed. What about my mother? Camille exhaled. She'll know soon. Not because we want drama. Because she deserves honesty before the media forces it. Zoe's chest tightened. And my father. Camille's gaze hardened. Let him come. Zoe stared at her. That's not very lawyerly. Camille's mouth curved faintly. That's very personal. Zoe's phone buzzed again. This time Zoe picked it up. Her mother. Zoe's finger hovered. Camille's hand tightened gently on Zoe's waist as if to say, breathe. Zoe answered. Mom, Zoe said, voice steady. Her mother's voice was tight, controlled, and furious beneath it. I need you here. Now. Zoe's stomach dropped. What happened? A journalist is outside my house, her mother said. And your father's people are confirming things off record. Zoe closed her eyes briefly, tasting bitterness. I'm coming. She hung up. For a moment, Zoe just stood there, phone in hand, as if the world had stepped closer to the edge of her life. Camille watched her carefully. I have to go, Zoe whispered. Camille nodded once. I'm coming with you. Zoe blinked. Camille. Camille's eyes held hers. Not inside. Not as your... anything. As your mother's counsel. Zoe's chest tightened. That's still... too close? Camille asked softly. Zoe swallowed. The phrase echoed in her mind with a transformed weight. Too close had been danger. Now it was refusal to lie. Zoe nodded once. Yes. Camille's mouth softened. Then we learn how to stand there anyway. They moved quickly. Shoes, coats, keys. Camille's apartment door clicked shut behind them like the closing of a chapter that wasn't finished, only begun. In the elevator, Zoe stared at her reflection. Her face looked different. Not wild. Not reckless. Awake. Camille stood beside her, close enough that their sleeves brushed when the elevator swayed slightly. She didn't pull away. Neither did Zoe. When they reached the lobby, Camille's phone buzzed. A message. She glanced at it, jaw tightening. What? Zoe asked, already bracing. Camille's voice was low. Your father's attorney is requesting an emergency meeting. Today. Zoe's chest tightened. Of course. Camille slid her phone away and looked at Zoe with a steadiness that felt like a hand around Zoe's ribs, keeping her upright. Listen to me, Camille said quietly as they walked toward the car. They'll try to corner you into a version of yourself. Don't give it to them. Zoe swallowed. What version? Camille's gaze held hers. The obedient one. Zoe's breath hitched. She nodded. Outside, the air was cold and bright. The city looked exactly the same. But Zoe knew something was irreversibly different now. Because for the first time, she wasn't trying to win. She was trying to be honest. As Camille opened the passenger door for Zoe, their hands brushed, brief, unavoidable. Zoe's fingers curled around Camille's for one small second, a silent promise hidden in plain sight. Camille squeezed once, almost imperceptibly, then let go. The world didn't stop watching. If anything, it watched harder. But as Zoe slid into the car, and Camille shut the door, Zoe realized the fear in her chest had changed shape. It wasn't fear of falling anymore. It was fear of standing, and not knowing if she'd be strong enough to stay. Camille walked around to the driver's side, calm and precise, and when she got in, she looked at Zoe once before starting the engine. You're not alone, Camille said. Zoe's throat tightened. This could destabilize everything. Camille's expression didn't soften. It steadied. Then we learned to stay upright in the middle of it, she said. And as they pulled into the morning traffic, headlines forming, cameras waiting, men preparing their narratives, Zoe felt the weight of what she'd chosen settle fully into her bones. Not a fantasy. A life. A risk. A kind of freedom. The city ahead looked sharp and bright as glass, and Zoe knew there was no safe way forward. Only a true one. Would she still choose this when the cost finally had a face? Thank you for staying with their story. If this kind of quiet, dangerous love is what you crave, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have chosen truth even if it broke the life you were supposed to want?